What's up everybody, and welcome to part 3 of our Rumble Roses XX modding tutorial. In the previous two tutorials, I've shown you how to install the game either from the Microsoft website digitally or by copying it from your physical disk using an Xbox 360. We've also looked at how to explore the game files using Quick BMS, and today we're finally going to get into an actual mod and see from start to finish how to modify something in the game. Before we get started, I'd like to express my gratitude towards a couple of people that have made this tutorial possible. So the first person is Mario Kart 64N, who you are probably familiar with if you've taken an interest in modding this game. He has made some videos way back in the day that actually go fairly in depth in terms of doing various kind of modding and exploring the file format. And basically he figured out everything that we know today. Possibly with some small exceptions. I do bring some things to the table eventually that I will show in future videos, but a lot of the original knowledge is really due to this one guy doing a lot of the legwork, as far as I can tell, in terms of figuring out how everything works in this game. Now, the second person I also want to thank is this person called DFXYZ on GitHub. They ported what I imagine to be Mario Kart's original code to Rust and made it fairly easy to use to pack and unpack all of the various file formats that we need to deal with when doing Rumble Roses XX modding. And he didn't provide any documentation, and so I had to kind of figure out exactly what this tool does. But it's basically all we're going to use today, and we're going to be able to accomplish a complete from start to finish mod of a character in the game. So thank you to DFXYZ for creating that code, for putting it on GitHub, making it available to the world. Now, they only provide the source code, so when I forked the repository, as you can see here, I created a release with a Windows compiled binary that you can just download and use without having to download Rust and the Rust compiler and figure out how to use that, as I had to do to build the actual exe. So feel free to grab the exe. I'll leave a link down below. Or if you don't trust me and somehow trust the source code better, grab the source code and compile it yourself. Word of warning, this is a command line tool, and so we're going to be spending quite a bit of time in this tutorial on the command line. I'll try to make it as painless as possible for those of you that are not particularly command line savvy, and give a slightly better overview of what's happening rather than just typing in commands. But you will have to pay attention closely to see what's happening and probably rewatch these parts of the video a few times to get everything. So before jumping to the command line, let me just show you the directory structure that we're working with. I created this directory on my D drive in RRXX folder under game pack, where I put our working files. So we've got the pack file that I grabbed from the game install, and if you don't know how to get this, please watch the previous two tutorials. And then I have the rrmod tool exe, which I covered earlier in this video, and you can find a link to this in the description below. Jumping over to the command line, and here I'm using PowerShell because I'm a power user, but you can also use cmd exe as well. It's just a little bit more cumbersome for certain things, plus this supports Unix commands that I'm used to, so you'll see me using some of those, but it's all the same for the purposes of this exercise. So whatever command line you feel comfortable with on Windows, just use that. And if you want this exact experience, run PowerShell. That's the name of this program. All right, so we're in the same location here. You can see it's DRRXX game pack that we saw in the Explore window earlier. And we've got the same files here, ch0000.pack and the rrmod tool exe. It's nice to have the exe here because I can just run it from this directory without having to specify the full path. As you can see, the last command I ran here was rrmod tool exe with the -h option for help, and it outputs its usage, so we can see that you can run it in two forms, with the p format and with -u. So this is for packing and unpacking. The first form is -p to pack into a particular format, and the second form -u is just to unpack, and you don't need to specify the format. The tool will figure it out on the fly. The available formats are shown here. This is text for the texture format, BPE, which I think is some sort of a compressed file of textures. In any case, these two kind of go hand in hand, the text and BPE. And then we have the packh and the epack formats, which are the two nested pack formats that are present within the pack file. So let's run our rr mod tool exe to unpack the first level of the pack file. So here we specify -u, give it the pack file, and then the destination directory. Now, if we run ls, we see that our directory has been created, and if we cd into that directory, we can check out the files that have been unpacked there. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of files that have names of numbers. This should be pretty reminiscent of what we saw when we used quick BMS to unpack this pack file in the previous tutorial. There are going to be some slight differences here though, and the main reason that we're using this tool now rather than quick BMS is that this will allow us to repack, whereas the unpacking that quick BMS does was only one way. Okay, so let's grab the very first file in here. This is the one called 0000, and this corresponds to the vanilla or the default color of Reiko, the red Reiko model and textures file. So in case you're not familiar with the command line, whenever you get no output from this command is when it succeeds. And when you do something wrong, you're going to get a message back, either a stack trace of some kind or the usage message if you mess up the actual arguments. So in this case, you saw me do the command but not specify the destination folder, and so we got the usage message. Now we're going to add the destination folder, and it should return nothing and just give you the prompt back. That means it succeeded. So if we do a file listing with ls and then scroll up to the top, we'll see our directory is now here, this 0000.unpacked. You can see it's a directory because it has mode set to D. Now we can go inside this directory and see what's there by doing an ls. Now I happen to know that some of these are object files, so 0 represents the body object, 1 is the face. But the file that we're interested in right now is this 10 file. This is the BPE archive of textures. Let me just pop over into Explorer and just show you these a little bit more visually, just in case you've had trouble following what's happening on the command line here. I'll show you these files and folders in Explorer so it's a little bit more visually understandable. So these here are the files that we just unpacked. You can see it's the same as we saw on the command line, but hopefully for those of you that had trouble following that, you can see them here in a more familiar view. And just for reference, let's take a look at the same unpacked file, but created using quick BMS as I've shown in the previous video, so tutorial part 2. So this is the biggest difference between the two tools. So quick BMS recursively opens up the archives and then all the archives that are contained within that archive. When I say archive, I mean the pack files and then the BPEs and text files and etc. Whereas the rrmod tool extracts the files one by one explicitly based on which file you want to unpack. And as a result, I believe this is why quick BMS has trouble repacking the files. It technically has that capability, but it doesn't work for the uke script. So I suspect this is the reason why, because it just dumps recursively everything into the same directory and it doesn't know how to put everything back together, which is why we use this tool instead. But for exploring the contents of the pack file, I think quick BMS is a little bit easier. So if all you want to do is grab the textures, for example, and you don't care about packing them back up, you just want to work on them or something, quick BMS is a good solution. Or if you want to find an object file or a model object file rather, same story. So essentially, both tools are useful. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Since in this tutorial today, we're going to be looking at taking a texture, modifying it, and repacking it back up. This RR mod tool is the tool to use. If you wanted to do something different, grab a model or a texture and make a DLC mod, for example, which is something I'll be showing in future videos, then you could use Quick BMS and just grab those files, and it's much quicker and easier. Okay, let's get back to unpacking the texture files. So these are all contained in this 10 file. This is always the case for all the character pack files, so you can be sure that that's where they are. You can of course confirm this 10 file should be in BPE format. You can check that by opening it in a hex editor, and the very first string that you'll see there should be BPE as opposed to some other type of files. But in any case, that's not super important. Just run the rrmod tool -u on it and it will unpack it regardless of what type it is. I call the destination file 10.bpe here. This is kind of inaccurate. I should probably have called it 10.tex because that's actually the format of the newly created file. BPE was the format of the original. It's not super important what you call these. It just helps you when you're repacking them to specify the correct options. Okay, in this next section, you're going to see me make some mistakes, and also I'll do some things that are a little bit confusing, so I'll try to explain them. I really should have done this a little bit cleaner, but this was actually the first time that I was going through and doing this, so you can see a little bit of the struggle here. So I decided to go ahead and make the unpacked file be 10.tex after all, and then I unpack that file and name the resulting folder 10.bpe. This is actually pretty confusing. That resulting folder should probably just be called textures or something like that to be most obvious. But in any case, that's what happens here. Essentially, you run rrmod tool -u to unpack the number 10 file, and then you unpack the resulting file once again, and that's how you get the folder with the textures. And here we see these textures in their folder in Explorer with nice little previews, so you can tell this is actually the textures for Reiko. Now you can see all these textures are in DDS format, which is a slightly unusual image format, I think. So I'm going to use the GIMP to edit them, and I don't quite remember if I had to install something or if the GIMP supports DDS natively. I think it supported it natively. But I could be wrong, and you might need to Google and install some plugin or something to let you edit these things. In any case, let's pop open Reiko's face texture here and give her a nice face tattoo. And once we finished our amazing graphical work, I'll just go ahead and do File and then overwrite the original file name, and the GIMP will export the results back into the same format so we can continue using them in the game. And now we just need to pack everything back up, make sure that the directory is clean and we've removed all the intermediate files that we generated, such as all the unpacked stuff, and we'll be ready to go testing this new texture mod. Step 1 is to take our texture directory and turn it into a texture file. And we do this with our mod tool -p, and the format that we use here is tex for textures. We give it the folder that we have all of our textures in, and then the output file, or the new texture file that's going to be generated. Now, since the command didn't return any errors, we know that we've just generated our new texture pack in this 10new.tex file. Here we can see that 10new.tex is created, and if we compare it to the original file, you can tell the size is actually noticeably bigger. This is not a problem using this method, so we can actually create packs that are larger than the original. And this is an artifact of GIMP exploding the file size when you modify and re-export the DDS files. I haven't really found a way to re-export it with small file sizes, but this doesn't seem to be a problem for this particular modding approach. Next, we need to take our 10new.tex file and turn it back into a BPE. So we do -p bpe, give it the text file, and set the output to be 10.new. This should run for a few seconds as there are a lot of textures to repack, but eventually it should give you the prompt back, and this is how you know it completed successfully. As usual, there's no output if the command is successful, you only get output if something goes wrong. So in this case, if we do an ls, we can see that the 10.new file is here, and it's a bit larger than the original 10 file. as expected since the texture files have increased in size. I'm going to delete the original 10 file and then move the new 10 file into place to replace it. You can see I skipped my attempts to do that initially. You can see some errors in the command prompt in red here. So this is what happens when you do something wrong. You will get pretty loud errors yelling at you. So just to reinforce the point that commands succeed quietly but fail loudly. And then I go through and delete all the other files that were created during the unpacking process. We want to basically get back to a clean state as we had before and remove any temporary files that we've generated during this process. And again, you see me failing on a couple of attempts here. I'm not super familiar with PowerShell. And you can, of course, do all these renames and cleanups in File Explorer with your mouse instead of typing these commands like I do here. That's probably going to be a lot easier, and you'll actually see me do that slightly later on in this video as well. Alright, now that everything is nice and tidy here, let's go a directory up, and then we'll repack this directory. As you can probably tell, I skip a few of my attempts to do this, and this screen is now full of errors. But let's take a look at the bottom where I finally get the repack command correct. So since this 0000.unpack directory is of type packch, this is what we need to do. So we do rr mod tool -p, give it the format packch, and then specify the directory that we're repacking, and then the new file name of the repack directory, which will be 0000.new. And it returns the prompt without any errors, so we know we regenerated the 0000 file. Once again, we can see here that it's slightly larger than the original, and that's totally fine. We'll still be able to use it. And this time around, I go over into File Explorer and clean up the files there. I've learned my lesson from earlier. I'm clearly not a PowerShell master that I thought I was. So I'll delete the original 0000 file, rename the new file to that name, and then we can also get rid of that 0000.unpacked folder, which kept all of our unpacked files. Basically get this directory back to its original composition of files. We don't want any extraneous stuff in here. And now finally, for the last repacking step, we go back up a directory and we run rrmodtool.exe once again with -p option for pack. We give it the epack format. This is the format of the top level pack file. And then we give it the directory where everything was unpacked to. And finally, we specify the name of our new pack file. So let's hit enter, and as long as we get no errors, we can see that the new pack file has been generated. The only thing left is to grab this new pack file, take it back to our Xenia install directory for where the game lives, and replace the original with this one. I'll skip through this fairly quickly. I think it's self-explanatory, but slow down the video if you find that this is going too fast in this section. Alright, final step, let's verify our work. We're gonna fire up Xenia, we're gonna go to File, Open, and load up the default xex file from our install directory where we just replaced the pack file. Well, let's just fast forward through the game startup and get to the menu. And selecting Reiko, there we go. There's our beautiful artwork. Congratulations, we just successfully modded the character. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this tutorial. We've learned how to unpack the character pack file, how to recursively unpack the files that are contained within, edit a texture, and then repack everything back together, and then actually load it in Xenia and see the result of our texture edit. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for more Rumble Rose XX modding tutorials, where we'll go into more details with texture mods, DLC mods, model mods, where we actually change shapes of some of the figures, and things along those lines. It's going to be fun. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.